The Hidden Veil by Edwina Longbottom. Chapter 1. The Seed of Curiosity. It was an ordinary Wednesday in the library, the kind of day where the hours bled together, marked only by the subtle shifts in sunlight streaming through the tall windows. The library's stillness was a comfort to me, a place where time felt frozen, and each book held a world that could be opened with a single gesture. I was stacking books behind the counter when I heard it. A low, conspiratorial voice drifting across the quiet like a leaf skimming the surface of a still pond. "Have you heard about the veil?" The question was muffled, but something about the tone caught my attention. It was hushed, deliberate. I glanced up, scanning the rows of shelves until I spotted the source. A regular patron, an older man named Mr. Donahue, who always seemed to hover near the philosophy section. He was talking to another patron, a younger man in a faded hoodie who looked both intrigued and unsettled. The phrase "the veil" was vague, yet it lingered in the air with an almost palpable weight. I'd been a librarian for years, but I'd never heard of anything like it. Mr. Donahue leaned in closer to the young man, his voice barely audible. I strained to hear. "They don't want us to know," he was saying. "It's all part of a cover-up. You think reality is as it seems? Think again." The younger man looked around nervously before whispering back, "Are you sure about this? It sounds impossible." Mr. Donahue's expression was unreadable, a strange mixture of fear and conviction. He nodded slowly, his gaze unfocused, as though he were seeing something far beyond the library's walls. "I'm more than sure. I've seen things that don't add up. The veil is their way of keeping us in line, hiding the truth right under our noses." Curiosity gnawed at me, but I kept my distance, pretending to organize a nearby shelf while I eavesdropped on their conversation. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as idle chatter, just another conspiracy theory cooked up by an overactive imagination. But something about Mr. Donahue's voice was different, a kind of desperation, a conviction that bordered on obsession. As I continued my work, I tried to brush off what I'd overheard, but the words clung to my mind like a burr. I'd always been a skeptic, someone who believed in evidence, in logic and reason. Yet as the minutes ticked by, I found myself unable to shake the strange, unsettling feeling that had settled over me. The rest of the day passed in a blur, my mind drifting back to that conversation again and again. I tried to focus on my tasks, sorting, cataloging, helping patrons find their books, but the questions gnawed at me. What was the veil? And why did Mr. Donahue seem so certain it was real? By the time I closed the library that evening, I knew I wouldn't be able to let it go. Chapter 2. A Curiosity Ignited. That night, as I sat in my small, dimly lit apartment, I couldn't escape the words echoing in my mind. The veil is their way of keeping us in line, hiding the truth right under our noses. It was as if a seed had been planted, sprouting 1,000 questions that refused to fade. I sat at my desk, flipping open my laptop. For years, I'd prided myself on my skepticism, my dedication to facts and evidence. But that very commitment to understanding the truth made it impossible to ignore what I'd heard. Mr. Donahue had looked so certain, and the young man's reaction wasn't just fascination, it was fear. "All right, Alex," I muttered to myself. "Time to see what you can find." I typed "The Veil Conspiracy" into the search bar, unsure what to expect. At first, nothing unusual came up. A handful of blog posts, a few links to conspiracy sites I'd never visited. But then I found something that sent a chill down my spine. A thread titled "Project Veil, the Truth They Don't Want Us to Know." Clicking on the link, I was taken to a shadowed website, its dark background and grainy images giving it an eerie, almost forbidden feel. The first post was written in bold, capital letters. "Project Veil is real. Wake up before it's too late." I scrolled down, my heart thudding in my chest. The posts were a chaotic jumble of theories and warnings, each more extreme than the last. Some claimed the veil was a government experiment to control the public, while others insisted it was an alien technology designed to alter reality. There were mentions of people disappearing, memories being erased, and strange symbols appearing in random places. But the further I read, the more it became clear that no one really knew what the veil was. Everyone had their own version of the story, their own fears and suspicions, but there was no consistent thread tying it all together. And yet, the conviction with which these people spoke was chilling. One post, written by a user named TruthSeeker89, stood out. I used to be like you. I thought the veil was a joke, something only paranoid people believed. But then I saw it for myself. I started noticing things, small details that didn't add up, memories that felt altered. If you're reading this, don't ignore the signs. They're watching us, waiting for us to forget. I sat back in my chair, a strange sense of unease creeping over me. The posts were filled with wild speculation. Yes, but something about the way they were written felt genuine. As if these people weren't just making things up for attention, they genuinely believed what they were saying. Shaking my head, I closed my laptop. It was late, and I knew I'd be better off getting some rest. But as I lay in bed that night, the words continued to echo in my mind, blending with Mr. Donahue's voice until they became a haunting whisper that refused to fade. Chapter 3: Shadows in the Library. The next morning I arrived at the library feeling both exhausted and unsettled. My curiosity about the veil had only grown stronger, and I found myself looking for any excuse to learn more. I wondered if Mr. Donahue would return, if I might be able to get him to talk again, to explain exactly what he thought the veil was. As the day wore on, I found myself glancing toward the door every time a new patron entered, my heart leaping with a mixture of hope and apprehension. But Mr. Donahue didn't show. Instead, a different face appeared, someone I hadn't seen before. He was tall, with sharp features and a piercing gaze that seemed to take in everything around him with unsettling intensity. He wore a black coat and carried a worn leather bag, which he clutched tightly as he moved through the aisles. I couldn't help but watch him, my curiosity piqued. He seemed out of place, as if he didn't belong in the quiet, peaceful world of the library. I tried to shake off the feeling, reminding myself that not every unusual visitor was connected to the veil. But then he did something strange. He stopped in the middle of an aisle, looked around, and then slipped a small booklet from his bag, sliding it onto the shelf. It was barely visible, tucked behind a row of older, dusty books that rarely saw the light of day. I waited until he left the aisle, my heart pounding as I approached the shelf. The booklet was nondescript, with a plain black cover and no title. Curious, I pulled it out and flipped it open. The first page read, "Project Veil, an expose on the truth they don't want you to know." I glanced around, half expecting someone to be watching me, but the library was empty. With trembling hands, I continued reading. The booklet was a strange mixture of fact and fiction, or at least it seemed that way. It detailed a supposed government project that began years ago, a top-secret initiative to study human perception and manipulate reality. According to the text, the project had been disguised as scientific research, but its true purpose was far darker: to keep the public blind to certain truths, to hide reality itself from those who couldn't be trusted with it. As I read, a creeping sense of dread settled over me. The words were unsettling, written with a certainty that made it hard to dismiss as mere paranoia. There were pages detailing how Project Veil supposedly altered memories, how it used subtle psychological tricks to make people forget things they'd seen, even entire events. One section, highlighted in red ink, stood out. If you're reading this, it's because you've started to notice. The world around you doesn't add up. Trust your instincts, question everything. They want you to doubt yourself, to believe you're the one who's crazy. But you're not alone. Keep looking. The veil is thin, and one day it will fall. The words were chilling, a strange blend of encouragement and warning. I glanced up, half expecting to see the man in the black coat watching me from across the library, but he was gone. I was alone, standing there with this booklet that felt like a glimpse into someone else's nightmare. As I closed the booklet, a sense of unease settled over me. I didn't know what to believe anymore. On one hand, the booklet's claims were outrageous, the kind of thing only the most paranoid minds would entertain. But on the other, there was a nagging feeling that perhaps, just perhaps, there was a sliver of truth hidden within. Chapter 4: An Unexpected Meeting. The following day, I brought the booklet with me to the library, tucking it into a drawer beneath the counter. I wasn't sure what I planned to do with it, but I felt a strange responsibility to keep it safe, as if it held a secret too important to discard. As I settled into my routine, the library door swung open, and to my surprise, Mr. Donahue entered, his expression tense. He walked straight to the counter, his eyes darting around the library as if he were expecting to be followed. "Good morning, Mr. Donahue," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. He looked at me for a long moment, then leaned forward, his voice barely above a whisper. "I hear you've been asking about the veil." My heart skipped a beat. "I just overheard you talking about it the other day. It sounded interesting." He gave a humorless chuckle. "Interesting, that's one way to put it. Dangerous is more like—" I hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "Someone left this," I said, pulling the booklet from the drawer and handing it to him. "Do you know anything about it?" Mr. Donahue's face paled as he flipped through the pages, his hands trembling slightly. "Where did you get this?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. "A man left it on the shelf yesterday. I didn't recognize him." He shook his head slowly, a look of horror in his eyes. "This is more than just a story, Alex. The people behind the veil, they don't like questions. They don't like people poking around where they shouldn't. Whoever gave you this was trying to send a message, but it's not a friendly one." I swallowed, feeling a chill crawl down my spine. "Do you think they're watching us?" He nodded grimly. "Watching, listening, manipulating. You don't understand what you're dealing with. The veil isn't just a theory. It's a weapon, a tool they use to keep us all in line." I wanted to dismiss his words as paranoia, but the fear in his eyes was real. This was a man who genuinely believed he was being watched, hunted by unseen forces. And as much as I wanted to brush it off, I couldn't deny the growing sense of dread that had taken root in my own mind. "What should I do?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Mr. Donahue looked at me with a strange, almost pitying expression. "If you're smart, you'll forget you ever heard about the veil. Destroy that booklet and pretend you never saw it." But even as he spoke, I knew it was too late. The questions had taken root, and there was no turning back. Chapter 5. Deepening Shadows. After Mr. Donahue's warning, I couldn't focus. Every creak, every rustle in the library seemed amplified, each noise carrying an ominous weight. The booklet lay hidden in my desk, but I felt as though it were burning a hole through the drawer, its presence inescapable. I tried to go about my day as usual, assisting patrons, organizing shelves, answering questions, but my mind kept drifting back to that booklet and to Mr. Donahue's haunted expression as he held it in his trembling hands. Finally, just before closing, I slipped away from the main counter, locking myself in the tiny back office. I pulled the booklet from its hiding place and sat down, flipping to a random page. The words were a strange mix of technical jargon and disturbing claims, references to memory manipulation, false reality construction, and something called perception overlays. One passage in particular caught my eye. "The true danger of Project Veil lies in its subtlety. It doesn't force people to see things that aren't there. It alters their perception so they can't see what is. It's a cloak, a mask, a means of keeping the masses in line without them ever knowing they've been deceived." The words sent a chill down my spine. Was it really possible? Could there be people out there with the power to control what others saw, what they remembered? I didn't want to believe it, but the more I read, the more plausible it all seemed. They're watching, listening, manipulating. Mr. Donahue's words echoed in my mind. Was he right? Was I in danger simply for asking questions? I slammed the booklet shut, shoving it back into the drawer with trembling hands. I took a few deep breaths, trying to calm myself. I knew I needed to clear my head to remind myself of what was real. But just as I was about to stand up, my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen. It was an unknown number. Hesitantly, I picked up. "Hello?" Silence. I was about to hang up when a voice crackled through, low and distorted. "Stay away from Project Veil, Alex, for your own good." The line went dead. I sat there, frozen, my mind racing. How did they know my name? How did they know I'd been asking about the veil? My heart hammered in my chest as I realized the implications. Whoever was behind this, they were watching me. They knew I'd been digging, and they wanted me to stop. But instead of scaring me off, the call had the opposite effect. I'd always been a skeptic, someone who believed in facts and evidence, and now I was being threatened for seeking the truth. It only fueled my curiosity, my determination to uncover whatever it was they were hiding. I had to know more. Chapter 6. The Vigilantes. The next day, I decided to take a different approach. I wanted to learn more about Project Veil, but I knew I couldn't go at it alone. I needed allies, people who knew about the veil, who could help me dig deeper without drawing too much attention. That's when I thought of Sam. Sam was an old friend, someone I'd known since high school. He was eccentric, a bit paranoid, but he had a knack for uncovering secrets. If anyone could help me navigate the world of conspiracies and misinformation, it was him. I found him in his usual haunt, a dimly lit bar on the edge of town, nursing a glass of whiskey and chatting with the bartender. He looked up as I approached, his eyes lighting up with a mischievous glint. "Well, if it isn't Alex the librarian, to what do I owe the pleasure?" I slid into the seat next to him, lowering my voice. "I need your help, Sam. I've come across something strange, something big." He raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "Strange and big are my specialty. Spill." I hesitated, glancing around to make sure no one was listening. Then I leaned in, keeping my voice barely above a whisper. "Have you heard of Project Veil?" Sam's expression changed instantly. The playful glint disappeared, replaced by a seriousness I hadn't seen in him before. He glanced around, his voice dropping to a murmur. "Where did you hear about that?" I told him everything, the conversation I'd overheard in the library, the booklet, the phone call. He listened intently, his face growing more and more tense. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. "Alex, you're playing with fire. Project Veil, it's not just a theory. There are people out there, dangerous people, who believe in it so deeply they'll do anything to protect it. There's even a group, a kind of vigilante force." "Vigilantes?" I echoed, my pulse quickening. He nodded. "They're people who think the veil is real, who believe it's their duty to expose it. They've been gathering for years, feeding off each other's paranoia, convinced they're the only ones who see the truth. They've tried to expose what they think is Project Veil's secret, and let's just say, they're not afraid to get their hands dirty." The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. These weren't just theorists. They were activists, people willing to go to any length to prove their beliefs. "And you think they might be watching me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded grimly. "If they think you know something, they won't hesitate. To them, you're either an ally or a threat." The words sent a shiver down my spine. I'd known this investigation was risky, but I hadn't realized just how deep the danger went. The vigilantes weren't just people looking for answers. They were soldiers in a hidden war, and I was now caught in the crossfire. Chapter 7. A Message from the Shadows. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every shadow seemed to hold eyes, every sound felt amplified. My apartment, normally a sanctuary, felt exposed, vulnerable. Around midnight, just as I was starting to drift off, my phone buzzed again. I picked it up, dreading what I might see. It was a message from an unknown number. "You've seen too much, Alex. Stop asking questions, or there will be consequences." I stared at the screen, my hands shaking. This wasn't just a warning, it was a threat. Whoever was behind the veil, they were willing to silence anyone who got too close. But something within me refused to back down. I'd always believed in seeking the truth, no matter the cost. And now, with so many lives potentially at stake, I knew I couldn't turn away. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I was going to keep digging, no matter the risks. If there were vigilantes out there, people who believed so strongly in this conspiracy that they were willing to harm others, then the truth needed to be exposed. I typed out a response, my fingers trembling. "You can try to scare me, but I'm not going anywhere. The truth deserves to be known." I hit send, a surge of defiance coursing through me. Whoever was on the other side of that message, they'd have to do more than send threats to stop me. Chapter 8. The Gathering Storm. The following days were a blur of research, sleepless nights, and a constant sense of dread. I scoured the internet, reading every theory, every claim about the veil. Each thread seemed to lead to another, deeper layer, a tangled web of information and misinformation that was nearly impossible to untangle. I started noticing strange things. An unfamiliar car parked outside my apartment, shadowy figures lingering around the library. One night I came home to find my door slightly ajar, as if someone had been inside. I searched every corner of my apartment, but nothing seemed to be missing. Still, the message was clear. I was being watched. One evening, just as the sun was setting, I received a message from Sam. "Meet me at the old warehouse by the docks. I've got something you need to see." The warehouse was a notorious spot, abandoned for years and often frequented by drifters and troublemakers. It was the last place I wanted to go, but I trusted Sam. If he had information about the Veil, I knew I had to hear it. When I arrived, the warehouse was dark and foreboding, its windows shattered and walls covered in graffiti. I slipped inside, my footsteps echoing through the empty space. "Sam?" I called out, my voice trembling. A figure emerged from the shadows. It was Sam, but his expression was strained, his eyes darting around nervously. "You came," he said, his voice low. "Good, we don't have much time." He handed me a folder, thick with documents and photographs. "What is this?" I asked, flipping through the pages. "Evidence," he replied, his voice tense. "Proof that Project Veil isn't just a theory. I've been tracking the vigilantes for years, collecting information. This is everything I've found." The folder contained everything I'd been searching for: records of strange disappearances, classified documents, witness testimonies. It was overwhelming, a flood of information that painted a chilling picture. "Sam, this is incredible," I whispered, awed by the depth of his research. But before I could say anything else, a noise echoed through the warehouse, a heavy metallic clang, followed by hurried footsteps. "We have to go," Sam hissed, grabbing my arm. "They know we're here." Chapter 9. Escape and Discovery. We stumbled through the shadows, racing toward the back exit of the warehouse. Behind us, the echo of footsteps grew louder, the sound bouncing off the cavernous walls. My heart thundered in my chest, each beat a reminder that this was real, that we were being hunted. We slipped out the door, blending into the night. Sam led me through a maze of alleys and side streets, his familiarity with the area giving us a small advantage. After what felt like an eternity, we reached a small, run-down apartment on the edge of town. Sam fumbled with his keys, finally pushing the door open, and we hurried inside. As soon as the door closed, I doubled over, gasping for air. Sam looked equally rattled, his face pale and his hands shaking. Who were they?" I finally managed, my voice a strained whisper. Sam shook his head. "They're part of the vigilantes, the more radical faction. They call themselves the Watchers. They've taken it upon themselves to reveal the truth about Project Veil, no matter the cost." "But why would they come after us?" "I thought they were supposed to be exposing the government, not other people asking questions." He glanced at me, a bitter smile on his face. "They don't trust anyone who hasn't proven their loyalty. They're so deep into their beliefs that they see anyone asking questions as a threat. To them, we're potential spies, traitors, and if they think we're getting too close to the truth—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. The implication was clear. We sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of everything sinking in. The folder of documents lay between us, a stark reminder of the information we now held and the danger it posed. I felt a strange mixture of fear and exhilaration. We had evidence, real evidence that could expose what the vigilantes believed to be Project Veil. But the closer we got, the higher the stakes became. Finally, Sam spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "Alex, you have to understand, Project Veil might not be exactly what they think it is, but there's something real here. I've seen it. I've met people who've had their lives altered, memories changed." I nodded, still trying to process everything. "So what do we do now?" He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "We need to get this information out, but it has to be done carefully. The last thing we want is for the Watchers to see us as a threat. We have to make them think we're on their side, or at least that we're not a threat to them." It was a risky plan, but it was our only option. I agreed, knowing that we couldn't back down now. We'd come too far, and the truth was too important to abandon. Chapter 10. The Double Bluff. Over the next few days, Sam and I devised a plan. We would spread pieces of the information online, anonymously, leaking just enough to keep the Watchers from suspecting we were trying to expose them. It was a delicate balance. We had to reveal enough to maintain their trust, but not enough to put ourselves in direct danger. Sam showed me the dark corners of the internet where the Watchers shared their theories. It was a world I'd never seen before, filled with coded messages, hidden forums, and an undercurrent of paranoia that was palpable even through a screen. The more I read, the more I realized just how deep this conspiracy ran. I began posting under a pseudonym, sharing small pieces of information from the folder. I crafted each post carefully, phrasing it in a way that would sound like someone who was in the know, someone who was part of the inner circle. The responses were immediate. People flooded the forums with comments, speculating about the information I'd shared, debating what it meant. And amidst the chaos, I noticed something strange, a pattern hidden in the posts. Certain users kept appearing, users who seemed to have insider knowledge of their own. They spoke with authority, their words laced with warnings and thinly veiled threats. "Be careful," one of them messaged me privately. "The truth is dangerous. Once you've seen the veil, you can't unsee it." The message sent a shiver down my spine. Whoever this was, they were watching us closely, monitoring everything we shared. It felt like walking a tightrope, each step a precarious balance between truth and deception. But as we continued posting, something surprising happened. Our posts began to gain traction, drawing attention from people outside the Watchers' circle. Journalists, bloggers, and even a few scientists started reaching out, curious about the information we'd shared. The story was spreading, taking on a life of its own. Chapter 11. Closing in. The tension was mounting. Sam and I could feel it, the pressure building with each post, each leak. The Watchers were growing restless, their messages becoming more urgent, their warnings more ominous. Then, one evening, Sam received a message that changed everything. "We know where you are. You can't hide from the truth." The message was signed with a symbol we recognized immediately, a line across a circle, the same symbol that had appeared in the booklet, in the posts, in every document tied to Project Veil. It was the mark of the Watchers, their way of identifying themselves. We knew then that our time was running out. They were closing in, and we needed to act fast. "It's time," Sam said, his voice laced with determination. "We need to release everything, all the documents, all the evidence. It's the only way to protect ourselves." I nodded, my heart pounding. This was it. We were about to expose everything, to lay bare the secrets that had driven so many people to the brink. Chapter 12. The Veil Unraveled. That night, we uploaded everything, the entire folder of documents, every piece of information we'd gathered, every truth and lie the Watchers had been hiding. We posted it to public forums, sent it to journalists, emailed it to activists and investigators. Within hours, the story exploded. The revelations were staggering. The documents showed that Project Veil had begun as a simple research initiative, a study on how people perceived reality. But over time, the project had morphed into something far more sinister. The government had used it to manipulate public perception, to control what people believed, to shape the narrative of reality itself. But the twist was that the Watchers, in their obsession to reveal the truth, had become part of the very system they sought to dismantle. They had unwittingly become pawns, spreading misinformation and paranoia, drawing attention away from the real issues, the real manipulations. As the story spread, the public response was immediate and overwhelming. People were outraged, not just at the government's actions, but at the vigilantes who had caused so much chaos in the name of truth. Protests erupted, demanding accountability, transparency, an end to the lies. And amidst the chaos, Sam and I watched from the sidelines, a mixture of relief and exhaustion washing over us. We had exposed the truth, but it had come at a cost. Epilogue: The Price of Truth. In the weeks that followed, the world seemed to shift. People were more aware, more critical of the information they consumed. The Watchers had disbanded, their credibility shattered by the very truths they had fought to expose. The government was under investigation, forced to answer for the ways it had manipulated public perception. As for me, I returned to my quiet life at the library, forever changed by what I had uncovered. I had seen the power of belief, the way it could be twisted and used to control people. And I had learned that sometimes the truth was more complicated than anyone could imagine. But I also knew that the fight wasn't over. The veil might have been lifted, but the forces that created it were still out there, waiting for the chance to rebuild. One evening, as I closed the library, I found a note slipped under the door. It was written in a familiar, shaky handwriting. "You did well, Alex, but remember, truth is only as powerful as those who believe it. Stay vigilant." There was no signature, but I didn't need one. I knew it was from Mr. Donahue, my unlikely ally in this strange journey. And as I walked home that night, I felt a strange sense of peace, knowing that I had done my part to uncover the truth, even if it was only a small piece of a much larger puzzle. The world was full of veils, layers of lies and half-truths that could obscure reality. But I had learned that sometimes all it took was one person willing to look a little closer, to ask the right questions, to pull back the curtain and reveal what lay beneath. And as long as there were people like that, I knew that the truth would always find a way to shine through.